All right, good news. I had a time to get a swim in between free agent signings. The 49ers have made 5 of them as the new league year approaches. It begins at 1 p.m. Pacific time today. The Rams just released Cooper Kupp. We talked about that this morning. I know that the Packers and Matt LaFleur are interested. Question now is, will Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers look to add more to the wide receiver room? They added Kupp's ex-teammate DeMarcus Robinson to the squad yesterday. Anyway, here's my conversation with Greg Papa and Greg Silver on KMBR, really summarizing what the 49ers have done so far, spinning it forward to the future. Some Moneyball going on. I think it's fitting because Greg Papa actually was a star actor alongside Brad Pitt in the movie Moneyball. Anyway, here's our 49ers discussion.
The SF Standard's finest, David Lombardi, joined the morning show yesterday, did some great breakdowns about the changes in personnel, the 49ers shedding some salary, and we've had even more news come in since then. So, David, I know this was a bit late notice, but as always, appreciate your willingness and availability to come on with us. And how are you doing this morning?
Great. I always light up when I get the text from you guys. Excited to talk. I think it's the perfect time to talk. We've got 90 minutes until the new league year starts. An entire new wave of players is going to officially become available. You're talking about Cooper Kupp. The Rams probably did him a solid by releasing him earlier than they had to. March 17th is when the $7.5 million roster bonus is due, but I think that he's done so much for that franchise and they're going to release him anyway. So they said, hey, doesn't look good for a trade. We'll let you go so you have your ability to sign with somebody else before this wave of free agency is over. So he should be available this afternoon. Dalvin Tomlinson will be available this afternoon. And on the Kupp front, if Matt LaFleur is interested, which we know he is in Green Bay, you would think that Kyle Shanahan would be interested. And all that I see right now, though, is price for the 49ers. And it's not just cap space. They have the cap space, but they're obviously recalibrating the cash spend this offseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what the price point is for Cooper Kupp, and that's going to determine whether or not the 49ers are interested.
Yeah, is the 44,502,982 that I'm reading as far as top 51 cap space, is that realistic? What number are you looking at? And, a lot of these decisions are based on finances. Cooper Kupp, it's a health situation, likewise with Joey Bosa. But you have to think, Kyle Shanahan loves Cooper Kupp. He would fit into the wide receiver room. But financially, is Cooper Kupp someone they can realistically, I don't want to say getting into a bidding war with because he was not traded. Teams didn't view him that way. But you're going to have to pay him. You're not going to, obviously insult Cooper Kupp like Joey Bosa. So, how much money do they have? And you mentioned Dalvin Tomlinson. I remember that game in 23 in Cleveland when the Niners lost on the Jake Moody field goal at the end. They could not run the ball at all. And it was Dalvin Tomlinson that wrecked that game inside. I know how much they like him as an interior run player. But how much money do they have to go out and realistically try to lure a Cooper Kupp or Dalvin Tomlinson, David?
Well, that's a better question for Jed York because the cash spend is the question right now for the 49ers. Cap-wise, they're okay. They've also cleared a ton of space in future years with the players that they either released or didn't re-sign. So I think cap-wise, I keep track of it a little bit differently. What I do is I look at the 53-man roster projection, which is going to come out about the same as the top 51 that are counted in the offseason. But I look at the 53-man roster projection, I make my own, and then I tally up how much that's going to cost, plus all the practice squad spots. And I have somewhere from 45 to 55 million right now. So they have enough to, yes, get into a bidding war with somebody in terms of cap space and still be all right. But what they're really trying to do this offseason is be cash spend efficient. And if you actually look at how NFL rosters are built to be sustainable in the long term, that kind of discipline ends up paying off if you know how to draft. And in NFL, throwing money at problems over the long run has never really been a sustainable strategy. The sustainable strategy goes through building with draft picks. That's obviously what the 49ers are trying to do, but that doesn't mean that they won't be in on some higher profile veterans if they think that they're going to fit that cost efficiency structure. And I think that somebody like Cooper Kupp is definitely somebody worth considering under that formula. So is Dalvin Tomlinson. Again, though, your original question was how high can they go in a bidding war? Ultimately, that goes to how much cash Jed York is going to want to spend in this free agency.
David, were you surprised at all by the release of Leonard Floyd? Because that happened on our show yesterday, and it did ultimately save them $8 million. But then the 49ers didn't get Joey Bosa. He goes to Buffalo. And so I kind of wanted to get your take on this because you laid it out so nicely with the philosophy of cutting cash spending and doing a little bit of a reset while trying to maintain relevancy. But what were your thoughts on the Leonard Floyd release in particular?
Well, let's not pretend that this was a good defense last year. This was the number 26 defense in the NFL, and they're number 29 against the run. I thought Floyd had a fine season pass rushing, 8.5 sacks. He's a good cleanup sack guy, and there's a lot of skill to that. I talked about that a lot over the course of last season. But Robert Saleh has inherited a defense that was in a downward spiral that the 49ers needed to resuscitate. And long answer short, no, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised by the Malik Collins release either, because the 49ers only had one plus graded run defender on the defensive line last year, and it was Nick Bosa. I thought that was a big reason why they were interested in Joey Bosa, because he'd bring a better edge-setting presence against the run. But I just think that Robert Saleh is going to want bigger framed defensive ends. Leonard Floyd was out there looking like a stronger receiver at 240 pounds, and I think that helped him in a lot of ways with his speed rush and beating offensive linemen through athleticism. But the 49ers just weren't good against the run, period, last year, and a lot of that probably the blame of the linebacker and the safety positions as well, but you can't escape fault if you're the defensive line. So I think the philosophical rework of the defensive line is less about money and more about making sure that they've actually got some run stoppers in there. That's why we're talking about Dalvin Tomlinson. That's why we were talking about Joey Bosa. And I don't think that the Leonard Floyd cut had anything to do with Joey Bosa potentially coming to the 49ers. I think that as they restock this defensive line, they're going to be doing it with the thought that they finished number 29 in run defense last year, and they know they just can't run back the season in 2025 with the same group of guys and expect different results.
Yeah, we were at the Combine a couple of weeks ago, David, as you were, and there's no question the D-line is where the strength of this draft is, both interior guys and edge guys. You may have 10 defensive linemen get chosen on day one of the NFL draft. But they've got to do better. They've got to fortify this roster. They're light. It was good bringing Kevin Givens back, but they don't have a lot. You mentioned Dalvin Tomlinson. I know how much they love him. Speak to the cost factor on him. And then we were talking about DeMarcus Lawrence. Wow, what's wrong with him? And that guy has been a force in this league for a while. Had that foot injury early in the year. Assuming the medicals, that could be a really cost-efficient find. And then I know they like to bring back their guys. I mean, Cleveland Ferrell was a great run player here before he got hurt. The last game of the year leading to the Super Bowl run against Kansas City, Charles Omenihu is out there. Now, he ran a foul off the field. Just give me some names before we start thinking about draft and this next wave of free agency that we may be thinking about on the D-line, David.
Yeah, I think that the ones that you listed there, Omenihu's a bit younger than those guys, so he might go for a bit more, but the bargain signings are typically the guys in their 30s, but not too far into their 30s, so you still get some juice, right? And DeMarcus Lawrence can set an edge, play the run. We talk about Dalvin Tomlinson. Those are, I think, two of the headlining names I would think of right now as far as veterans that the 49ers can pick up. Cleveland Ferrell did a great job against the run. I still remember back in that 2023 season, that really hurt the 49ers when he got injured. The playoffs were brutal for San Francisco against the run. I know that they got it back together for the Super Bowl, but against both Green Bay and Detroit without him, that was really the beginning of the end of this run defense, right? Then they dropped down to the number 29 I was talking about. One thing I really like about Dalvin Tomlinson is that he's done what he's done in the wide nine with Jim Schwartz in Cleveland. And it's tough in the wide nine because there's extra space in between those defensive linemen, which makes what the linebackers and the safeties are doing all the more important too, because they're filling those gaps. But the defensive tackles, especially in the wide nine, are having to command a big island. And that means, yes, of course, you got strength as a D tackle, but you also have to have this spatial awareness and this athleticism to be, and length really, to be able to make sure that stuff isn't getting by you. And this has been an issue for the 49ers over the past couple of years when they've had defensive tackle injuries, when Eric Armstead wasn't available in a couple of those seasons. That's why the run defense started to falter, and then there's just been real talent attrition for the 49ers. So they have to find a way to restock. I will go back to the draft and say there are 41 defensive tackles invited to the Combine this year after only 25 last season. So that gives you an idea of how deep this defensive tackle class is. But I agree that the way the 49ers have to address it starts in free agency. It's going to start with some of these bargains in free agency, and that sets the table for the draft because you want to make sure that you have some veteran pillars in there to help guide some of these younger players along.
Talking to David Lombardi here of the SF Standard. And David, with the acquisition of Luke Farrell from the Jaguars, combined with the departure of Kyle Juszczyk, there's a lot being made about the philosophical scheme change from 21 to 12 personnel. What would be just your best way to kind of explain it on the broad scale to our listeners as far as how the 49ers offense might look, not in terms of just who's out there, but just kind of like how it's going to function as they try to move up and down the field next year?
Well, Shanahan's system, to begin, is very demanding in regards to the type of blocks that it requires from players either at tight end, fullback, wide receiver, all across the board. And there is a very high level of adaptability that's required of players in this offense. That's why we always talk about wideouts who can block, and we talk so much about what Kyle Juszczyk was able to do at multiple different spots. And then we talk about George Kittle in the same light. So, 21 personnel in the simplest terms, 2 backs, 1 tight end, 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends. I think that it's not a night and day shift in between those 2 personnel packages, though, when you consider how versatile Kyle Shanahan has wanted his offense to be. Juszczyk blocked or executed the type of blocks that you'll see asked out of tight ends in several schemes. And if you watch Luke Farrell's tape, he's executing a lot of the same types of blocks that Kyle Juszczyk was asked to execute with the 49ers. So there's going to be a significant amount of crossover between those two. That being said, Farrell's going to be coming at this from the 6'5" tight end's vantage point. That's a higher center of gravity, so he's going to be better at certain things, potentially some of the downfield seam passing that the 49ers will try to do, some sneak attacks away from George Kittle to the secondary tight end, whereas Kyle Juszczyk came at this from the lower center of gravity, more of the bowling ball, right? He was 6'1", 6'2", the fullbacks perspective, and that's better for different things, especially removing some defensive ends and linebackers with some of the blocks that he had to execute. So I think at the end of the day, the 49ers are going to be attacking in a similar way, but from a different perspective, right? They're going to be hitting it from the 2 tight end perspective instead of the 2 back perspective with the fullback. But I think because this offense has already been amorphous before this, it's going to continue to be amorphous, maybe just more so tailored around Brock Purdy's skill set and his experience, because they played a whole heck of a lot of 2 tight end at Iowa State, and he was very successful with that there.
Yeah, and then over on the defensive side, obviously losing Dre Greenlaw was hard, and we wish him well in Denver. We'll see what his role is there. I know you've been watching a lot of these guys, Luke Gifford, and is somebody that's really interesting to me. How much have you watched of him as Tennessee tape? Because he's a great special teams player, but when he's been asked to play from scrimmage, he is fast. He ran in the 4.5s, but he plays a lot faster. He wears 57. I'm not going to say he's Dre, but man, he could easily compete with Curtis Robinson, D. Winters, and be that weak side linebacker. And then if you lost Fred at all, he could put the green dot on and go play Mike linebacker. Have you watched much of Luke Gifford, David?
I'll be honest, I'm buried in the work right now, so I've only seen the highlights of Luke Gifford. I know that he was a 300-plus special team snap guy. I know that the 49ers assistant special teams coordinator, Colt Anderson, was the special teams coordinator in Tennessee last year, so I'm sure that he is happy to have his ace with him now with the 49ers working on Brant Boyer's unit. The highlights I have seen, I saw his 1 interception, Luke Gifford's 1 interception, and it came off of Joe Burrow, and it was a really nice pick. He had to scoop it off the ground, just barely stopped it from hitting the turf. I can't wait to watch him. I got really excited when you said that he played really fast at that linebacker spot. I knew that he was capable of wearing the radio in his helmet. That's really important for the 49ers, obviously, from a depth perspective, because if Fred Warner gets hurt, that's a big trouble spot for the 49ers. But I've been wondering how they're going to replace Dre Greenlaw, because obviously it is a player they were interested in having back, just not at the price that Denver paid. And they are high on D. Winters, but competition is a good thing, just like the competition that they're fostering at safety. And it sounds like, based on what you've seen, that Luke Gifford can definitely throw his name into the ring at that linebacker 2 spot.
Couple more minutes here with David Lombardi, and one of the moves yesterday was Demarcus Robinson coming to the San Francisco 49ers. I was reading some of your piece in the SF Standard, and you talk about how he even played a little bit of X wide receiver. So kind of want to get your vision for Demarcus Robinson's fit within this offense. And then if Brandon Ayuk doesn't come back in time, could Demarcus Robinson fill that void, assuming he doesn't end up getting suspended from his DUI incident?
Yeah, I don't know if the 49ers have more intel on this than me or the Rams, but 7 days ago, Les Snead in a press conference talking about free agency said that one of the reasons that the Rams weren't bringing Demarcus Robinson back was because they thought that he might be facing NFL discipline, which would be a suspension for the DUI arrest back in November. Maybe the 49ers know that it might come later in the season, but the timing would be awfully inconvenient for them if Brandon Ayuk misses the first 4 games of the season on PUP and then Demarcus Robinson is suspended for 2 or 3 games at the start of the year. That would really defeat the purpose of picking up the slack here for Brandon Ayuk's departure. But putting that aside, what Robinson was able to do with the Rams last year, this was his age 29 year, his 9th season in the league, 500-plus receiving yards, 7 touchdowns. He had the one-hander in overtime on the deep pass from Matthew Stafford to beat the Seahawks. I mean, this is a good wideout. This is a veteran, skilled wideouts, obviously been in a system that is at least related to what the 49ers are running. I think that it's a really good versatile pickup for the 49ers. As Greg said in the intro, he runs good over routes. I just know that when we watched Demarcus Robinson last night, Greg and I were texting, and we noticed Cooper Kupp. You watch it and you see Cooper Kupp and you say, oh, the Rams are going to release him. Might that be a play that the 49ers also try to make? Are they done at wide receiver is my question. Robinson's a 500-yard guy. That's been his ceiling in the NFL. Good pickup, not a big pickup, cost-efficient price. $4.7 million per year. That can really help San Francisco, but especially given the questions in this receiving room. They've lost Deebo Samuel. They're tailoring this around Brock Purdy, and Brandon Ayuk is even part of trade discussions right now, that we're having. That they haven't denied that. Given all that, you wonder if the 49ers are done at that wide receiver position, and we're going to be watching really closely to see who else they might add.
Yeah, lastly, quarterback. Backup quarterback. We talked so much about it for years. Sam Darnold was here with Trey behind Brock and Jimmy and the whole thing, and they've lost. Joshua Dobbs is now a Patriot. Brandon Allen is out there. Do you see them re-signing? They've also got Tanner Mordecai. Well, just watching a lot of Luke Gifford and just crossover tape with Tennessee and Jacksonville and watching Luke Farrell. I see Mac Jones over and over and over again. And I liked him coming out of college. I thought the Niners were going to take him before they traded up. He's an unrestricted free agent right now. What are your thoughts on them signing a veteran backup quarterback, David?
Well, they were in talks with Jameis Winston. I don't know if those are ongoing, but Josina Anderson reported that the other day. That'd be an entertaining one. That guy's a quote machine, as we all know, one of the biggest personalities in the NFL. Mac Jones is somebody I think people circled a while back as a potential backup in San Francisco for the 2025 season, just based on the way that his career was going and what the contractual situation would be. So I think that'd make a whole lot of sense. I also remember that 2021 draft. I knew that they weren't going to draft him after they traded up to number 3. That wouldn't have made a whole lot of sense. But as you said, before they traded up, Mac Jones made a lot of sense back in 2021. He ended up going right around number 11 or number 12 that year, if I remember correctly.
He went 15 in New England, yeah.
To 15, yeah, so a little bit lower than that. So the value would have made sense at that point. And now the value might make sense as a backup quarterback. We've seen the 49ers rehabilitate the image of Sam Darnold. Congratulations to him. He just signed for quite a bit of money in Seattle. San Francisco is going to be facing him twice a year. So why not take another stab at it with somebody like Mac Jones in the room with Brock Purdy?
David, thanks so much for coming by with us. Always good to have you, get your insight on it, and we'll continue to read you in the Standard.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.